Hello po sa inyo. Ako pala si Val. Tas, ngayon, magagawa ko ng video para, to give a breakdown of Thomistic philosophy. What is Thomistic philosophy? What is Thomistic philosophy? What is Thomistic philosophy? Thomistic philosophy is the philosophy which is derived from the teachings and writings of Saint Thomas Aquinas. Saint Thomas Aquinas was a brilliant theologian and philosopher in the late 13th century. Now let us ask, why should I study Thomistic philosophy? First of all, it is one of the greatest philosophies of the Catholic Church. Secondly, it is one of the most robust as it means na it is, what we call this, it is very consistent, it is consistent to logic, it is rational, and most of all, it confines with Catholic doctrine and dogma. Now, in Thomistic philosophy, we have many fields. We have logic, metaphysics, ontology, which is a category of metaphysics, teleology, epistemology, so on and so forth. But what I want to discuss today is these two: logic and metaphysics. Now, metaphysics, not necessarily metaphysics like we are gonna study the first principles, like where everything comes from or how everything in the world exists, but we're gonna study what we call natural philosophy. What do we mean by natural philosophy? Normally, this can be called, in a modern sense, science. But then science is like biology, neurology, like the study of atoms, quantum physics, so on and so forth. But we are, in the sense of natural philosophy, we're talking about Aristotle. Aristotle was the person that Aquinas bases all his philosophical systems on. When we talk about natural philosophy, it's the study of how things exist in nature. Essentially, being, how things exist in that way or in this way. But first, we have to tackle logic, because of course, logic, as you can see here, is prior to metaphysics or natural philosophy. But logic, compared to the types of logic we see, like modal logic, where it's full of symbols, or it's full of chirva, Thomistic logic is quite simple yet very consistent. There is only three things that we need to learn. First, principles. Second, syllogisms. And third, what you call this? Propositions. What are principles? Principles are basically axioms. You may have heard this in math, but axioms are basically like this. 2 plus 2 equals 4. Am I right? 2 plus 2 cannot be 5. I have 2 fingers, I have 2 fingers, I add them together, it's 4, not 5. Making it 5 would be contradiction. So we have principles like that, such as we have 2. We have, 3 actually. But there are many principles, but there are three basic principles. One, principle of non-contradiction. Of non-contradiction. Two, principle of identity. Three, excluded meaning. These three principles are the basis of Aristotelian logic and reality as a whole. Let's first consider the principle of non-contradiction. Imagine I have a house. And I have a robber. Eyewitnesses, the people inside the house, and most of all the people who saw the thief, said that the robber went inside the house and stole. But then, the police says the thief did not come in and steal. So, ano ba talagang totoo? What actually happened? But in truth, in fact, the police only saw the backyard. And the thief, the eyewitnesses were the ones that were correct. Because they saw the thief with their own eyes and had evidence. So what does this mean for the principle of non-contradiction? The principle of non-contradiction, two truths cannot contradict each other. I cannot say that I exist and I do not exist. I cannot say that this person exists, but then say this does not exist. That would be a contradiction. So, two things or two truths cannot contradict each other. That's the basis of the principle of non-contradiction. Secondly, two truths cannot contradict each other in the same respect. At first, the thief, the house, the robber, and the police, the eyewitnesses, the people who saw the robber, and the people who were in the house, they said the robber came in and stole. But then, the police says, no, the thief didn't come in and steal, diba? The two things contradict each other. But in truth, the police, they only saw half of the story. While the others, the other people, they saw the truth. So they are not in the same respect. Because the police only saw the backyard, but the other people, they saw what actually happened. So they are not contradicting each other in the same respect. So what would be an example of a violation of the principle of non-contradiction? I will return to saying, I exist and I also do not exist. What? That would be contradiction. And it's in the same respect. It is in the respect of whether I exist or whether I do not exist. If we say I exist and I do not exist, then what am I really? So the two contradict. They're violating the principle of non-contradiction. If there were no principle of non-contradiction, then we would have no real things in life. For example, this this squishmallow, this could be existing and not existing at the same time, in the same respect. So nothing would exist in reality because there would be no principle of non-contradiction. So we call it a principle or an axiom. Axiom is basically a truth that must be accepted and cannot be proven because it is the highest of truth. Second, we have the principle Second, we have the principle of identity. What is the principle of identity? It's so easy. A equals A. Okay? A equals A. This squishmallow is a squishmallow. It is not a tree. Because if an A were to be A and A were to be B, then what really is A? Second. But then, we have to take the same thing na po. The same thing din. Same respect, same respect, same respect. Maybe there's a distinction. And it could be A equals A because it's, what do you call this? Its metaphysical identity is A, but its real identity is B. Once again, principle of non-contradiction is still the same. They're not in the same sense. Maybe they're speaking about science and other theology. Both are correct, but we're speaking in a different respect, so therefore they do not contradict. But in reality, everything needs to have identity of its own. So A is equal to A and no other. It cannot change its identity. Because if it were to change, then we could know nothing in reality. If I could change my identity and become a tree, then that would be impossible. And secondly, how would that work? And lastly, how would you come to know who I am? So that is the principle of identity. Lastly, we have the excluded middle. Being and non-being. Basically, being, it comes from the Latin word esse. Esse means the act of existing. So what do you mean by being? Esse. What does esse mean? The act of existing. So what do you mean by being? The act of existing. So, when I say I exist, when I say I do not exist, there is no in between. There is nothing in between being and non-being. You cannot imagine it. And how would that even work? I exist and do not exist at the same time. A person would think of like this. I split the person. The other one exists. The other one does not. But essentially, this is a privation. A privation just means a lack. What is a lack? Imagine I have a glass of water. Imagine I have a hand. And this hand is supposed to be there. But then I cut it off. Now I don't have any hand. But still, it's a privation. It's the lack of something that should be there. And we cannot have a middle. Something does not exist and something exists. There is no in between. So in the principle of excluded middle, the principle of the excluded middle in between two terms, there is no in between. Sa dalawang terms, walang gitna. Pwede ba yun? For example, a number line, negative and positive number line. Diba may zero sa gitna? But it's a measurement. From negative 100 to 1, it's rising up. So in actuality, the zero isn't in the middle. It's just a sort of, what you call this, gate from the negative to the positive. But in being and non-being, whether I exist or I do not exist, there is no in between. A thing cannot exist and do not exist at the same time. Same respect, principle of non-contradiction, principle of identity, and most of all, excluded. So those are principles in Aristotelian, Thomistic, and basic logic. Next, we have propositions. What are propositions? This one is very easy. What are propositions? I say, example, I am a boy. The proposition I am a boy implies that you are a boy. That is a proposition. And the word am, we call this affirmative. Why is it affirmative? Because if I were to add not, if I were to add I am not a boy, then that would be negative. So there are two types of propositions. Positive and negative. Positive normally uses the words is, or that defines something. This squishmallow is squishy. I used is. The squishmallow is squishy. So it's positive or affirmative. I am a boy. I'm not saying I am not a boy. I am a boy. It's positive or affirmative. I am not saying the opposite of what I want to say. Are. These things are existing. I affirm that they exist. So it's an affirmative proposition. Negative. Example. Not, none, or the Greek prefix a or anti. Let me give you an example. Not. I am not a girl. I am not. Not. I say the opposite. I am not a girl. That's negative. Non. There is existence and non-existence. I exist and I do not exist. No. Being and non-being. Non makes the negative proposition that it has no being, which is the act of existence. A and anti. These are Greek prefixes. When I say atheist, it comes from the root word theist. What is theist? Theist means a person that believes in God. A, it makes it negative. So atheist means someone who does not believe in God. Anti. For example, antivirus, it's against the virus. Anti-theist, or against theism, which is belief in God. Or anti-abortion, which is the killing of human lives. So we have positive and negative. So propositions are very easy. Positive or affirmative and negative. And we also have some sort like universal propositions, objective propositions, conditional propositions. But universal is just basically saying everyone is a boy. Conditional proposition, you can be a boy. And objective proposition, you are a boy. Objective just means it is what it is. And then last we have syllogisms, the favorites, the greatest innovation of Aristotle. Syllogism. Let me give you an example. Premise 1. Socrates is a man Premise 2. All men are mortal. Mortal just means that they can die. Premise 3. Or we can call this conclusion, but up to that later. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. So here is the syllogism. Socrates is a man. All men are mortal. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. You have to remember the proposition. Socrates is affirms. Affirmative proposition. Socrates is a man. Remember when I told you about objective, universal, and subjective. Is a man. It is an objective term because it does not say Socrates maybe is a man. No, it's objective. Socrates is a man. Premise 2. All men are mortal. This is an objective and universal proposition. All. All implies all implies lahat ng men are mortal. Are implies that it's affirmative. All implies that it is universal. Therefore, it implies a conclusion. Socrates is mortal. It's that easy. That is a syllogism. But for these premises, premise 1, premise 2, premise 3, we have for each a name. Major premise, minor premise. This one, we can remove this premise 3, and we call this the conclusion. We have the major premise that Socrates is a man, but I accidentally made my structure wrong. Major, when I hear the word major, then I must put the universal statement in the major premise. So let me change that. See, I change it. Now, premise 1 or minor premise, Socrates is a man. Major premise, all men are mortal. Conclusion, therefore Socrates is mortal. Normally, this is structured like this. Major, minor, conclusion. But I made a mistake that we can, improvise on this. So, major, it basically is like this. Imagine I have, what we call this? Imagine I have a cup. And in that cup, I put water. Therefore, in that cup is water. That's a syllogism. The major premise, I have a cup. The minor premise, I put water inside. The conclusion, therefore, there is water inside the cup. Why is it major? Why is it minor? Because major, it is something that it is being added to, or it is something that is given more information about. For example, the major term, or the major premise, all men are mortal. But the minor, Socrates is a man. Diba? Major is bigger, a bigger range. All men. But minor, just the single person named Socrates. So, we can easily see that major is just the universal term, while minor is the smaller or more specific one. And then from these two we draw the conclusion that Socrates is mortal. Logic seems so easy. But from these three things, it's where philosophy, logic, metaphysics gets its big, dense books. This big Summa Theologica. Why? All men are mortal. That is already a undefended premise. What if I say all men are mortal, but actually there is one person that is not mortal? Therefore, my premise is false. So how would I do that? How would I make it strong? The only way to that is to think, to write, to do philosophy. Minor, Socrates is a man. Yes, the minor one. This is very easy. Socrates is a man. I can just ask him, are you a man? Yes, he's a man. Conclusion. This is where it gets hot. So therefore, Socrates is a man, is mortal. Major premise, universal. It is weak, but it can still be defended. Second, minor, Socrates is a man. I can just ask him and he will say he is a man. Conclusion, therefore, Socrates is mortal. Whenever we say therefore, that's the trickiest part in making arguments. We have to make sure it is defended, and we make sure there is logical reasoning. To say therefore Socrates is mortal, what if he is immortal? So in science, how would we do that? We would do experiments, we would do interviews, so on and so forth. But in philosophy, logic, and metaphysics, we would think, reason, and do logical thinking through our words. So yeah, that's basic logic.